In 1955, a young man walked into a Hollywood studio executive's office with dreams of stardom. Within minutes, he was told to choose his career or his truth. He chose his career, married a woman he barely knew, and spent the next 30 years living a lie that would eventually kill him. This wasn't an isolated incident. Behind the glittering facade of Hollywood's golden age lay a shadow system of forced heterosexuality, manufactured marriages, and buried scandals. The very stars who embodied America's romantic ideals were forbidden from experiencing authentic love themselves. Tonight, we're pulling back the velvet curtain on 15 of the most shocking gay scandals that the studio system fought desperately to hide. These aren't just stories of forbidden romance. They're chronicles of survival in an industry that demanded its stars sacrifice their souls for stardom. Before we dive into these buried secrets, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because the truth Hollywood tried to bury deserves to be heard. Anthony Perkins, the man behind the monster. Anthony Perkins haunted audiences as Norman Bates, but the real horror lived behind the camera. The man who brought Psycho's twisted motel owner to life carried his own torment, a secret that would ultimately destroy him. Despite his marriage to actress Barry Berenson and their 2 children, Perkins lived in the shadows of his sexuality. His most significant relationship was with heartthrob Tab Hunter, a romance conducted entirely in darkness. They met at parties, exchanged coded glances across crowded rooms, and found stolen moments away from the studio's watchful eyes. Perkins crafted an elaborate public persona, fake dates with starlets, carefully staged photographs, a performance more convincing than any role he ever played on screen. But the strain was crushing him from within. In his private journals, revealed years after his death, Perkins wrote about cruising Times Square, desperate for connection yet terrified of exposure. Every encounter carried the risk of career suicide. Every relationship was poisoned by the fear of discovery. When AIDS began ravaging the gay community in the 1980s, Perkins faced his greatest terror. The disease would expose everything he'd spent decades hiding. He died in 1992, taking his secrets with him, a man who never got to live authentically in the spotlight he helped create. Ramon Novarro, the silent era's tragic star. In the 1920s, Ramon Novarro's smoldering eyes made him Hollywood's first Latin lover. His portrayal of the title character in Ben-Hur established him as cinema's ultimate romantic hero. Women swooned, box office records shattered. Studio executives counted their profits. But Novarro lived in constant terror. As a gay man in an industry built on heterosexual fantasy, he constructed an elaborate facade. Public dates with actresses, carefully orchestrated photo shoots, private dinners that were anything but private, always attended by studio-appointed chaperones who ensured nothing compromising occurred. His real relationships happened in the shadows, coded conversations at parties, fleeting encounters in rented rooms, a love life reduced to stolen moments and whispered promises. The studio system had created a golden prison, fame in exchange for freedom. By the 1940s, as his career waned, Novarro retreated from Hollywood's spotlight. He bought a modest home in the Hollywood Hills, surrounded himself with books and music, and tried to find peace in solitude. But the past wouldn't release him. In 1968, 2 young men broke into his home, believing rumors that he kept thousands of dollars hidden in a decorative crucifix. When they found no fortune, their disappointment turned to rage. They beat the 69-year-old actor to death, ending a life that had been shaped by fear and concluded by senseless violence. The press sensationalized his murder, focusing on his sexuality rather than celebrating his pioneering achievements in cinema. Raymond Burr, the defense attorney's secret life. For 9 years, Raymond Burr played Perry Mason, the unbeatable defense attorney who never lost a case. His commanding presence and sharp intellect made him television's most trusted lawyer. But his greatest performance happened off-screen, where he spent decades defending himself against the truth. After his brief marriage ended in 1948, Burr created an elaborate fiction to explain his single status. He invented a deceased wife and child, tragic casualties of a plane crash that never happened. The story generated sympathy while deflecting questions about his personal life. In reality, Burr had found love with Robert Benavides, whom he met on the Perry Mason set in 1960. Officially, Benavides was his business partner and occasional co-star. Privately, they shared a life together for 35 years, longer than most Hollywood marriages. They bought vineyards in California, traveled the world together, and built a quiet domestic life away from the studio system's prying eyes. Burr even maintained a bed at the studio to maintain appearances, though he spent most nights at the home he shared with Benavides. The performance required constant vigilance. Every public appearance, every interview, every photograph had to reinforce the fiction. But friends described a different Raymond Burr behind closed doors, warm, generous, and deeply devoted to his partner. When Burr died in 1993, Benavides was by his side. The secret they'd protected for decades died with them, leaving only rumors and speculation about one of television's most enduring love stories. Clark Gable. The King's Hidden Kingdom. Clark Gable embodied American masculinity. His roguish charm and Gone with the Wind made him the king of Hollywood. But behind the crown lay a complex man whose private life contradicted everything his public image represented. The rumors began early in his career. His close friendship with openly gay actor William Haynes raised eyebrows in an industry hypersensitive to scandal. When Haynes visited the Gone with the Wind set, someone joked that Gable had once been Billy's boy. Gable's violent reaction only fueled more speculation. His 5 marriages seemed designed to silence whispers about his sexuality. Each wedding generated massive publicity. Each divorce was carefully managed by studio publicists. But insiders noticed that his deepest emotional connections were often with men. During the filming of Gone with the Wind, Gable allegedly demanded the firing of director George Cukor, a known homosexual who made him uncomfortable. Whether this was due to personal history or professional differences remained Hollywood's eternal mystery. Later in his career, Gable formed close bonds with younger male actors, including Montgomery Clift, during the filming of The Misfits. Their friendship transcended the typical mentor-student relationship, creating speculation about deeper connections. Biographer David Brett described Gable as bisexual, citing evidence of relationships with both men and women throughout his life. But like many stars of his generation, Gable took his secrets to the grave, leaving only whispers and speculation about the man behind the legendary smile. Cary Grant. The Bachelor Hall. Mystery. Cary Grant's suave sophistication made him Hollywood's most eligible bachelor. But his most significant relationship wasn't with any of his 4 wives. It was with fellow actor Randolph Scott, with whom he shared a home for over a decade. Their Santa Monica beach house became known as Bachelor Hall, a sanctuary where 2 of Hollywood's most desirable men lived openly as a couple. Fan magazines celebrated their friendship, publishing photos of them cooking together, lounging by the pool, and entertaining guests. The images seem innocent now, but they were revolutionary for their time. Studio executives grew increasingly uncomfortable with the arrangement. Grant was supposed to be every woman's dream, not half of Hollywood's most obvious gay couple. Pressure mounted for both men to marry to restore their heterosexual credibility. In 1942, Scott married heiress Patricia Stillman in a ceremony that seemed more like a business transaction than a romantic union. Grant followed with his own series of marriages, each one generating headlines and silencing rumors temporarily. But their connection remained unbroken. Even after Scott's marriage, the 2 men maintained their friendship, their business partnerships, and what many believed was their romantic relationship. In a rare moment of honesty during a 1986 Barbara Walters interview, Grant admitted, Everyone thinks I'm gay. I may be, for all I know." The statement was both revelation and deflection, typical of a man who spent his career performing heterosexuality while living a more complex truth. Montgomery Clift, the method actor's authentic life. Montgomery Clift revolutionized American acting by bringing unprecedented emotional honesty to the screen. Unlike his contemporaries who relied on charisma and good looks, Clift exposed raw vulnerability in every performance. Off-screen, he applied the same commitment to authenticity. Unlike most gay actors of his era, Clift never married for appearances. He refused to participate in studio-arranged dates or manufactured romances. While other stars built careers on elaborate deceptions, Clift simply lived his life without explanation or apology. His closest friend was Elizabeth Taylor, who understood and protected his secrets. Their friendship transcended Hollywood's typical publicity arrangements. It was genuine affection between two people who saw through each other's public personas. Clift's sexuality was an open secret among Hollywood insiders. Director George Stevens described him as openly gay on film sets. Fellow actor Jack Larson remembered him as someone who never hid his relationships with men, though he didn't broadcast them either. The pressure of living authentically in Hollywood's closeted environment took its toll. Clift struggled with alcohol and substance abuse, using drugs to numb the pain of constant performance and hidden love. His 1956 car accident left him physically scarred, but friends knew the real damage was psychological. Despite the personal cost, Clift never compromised his artistic integrity or his personal truth. He remained one of Hollywood's most honest performers, both on screen and off, a man who chose authenticity over easy success. Rock Hudson, the matinee idol's fatal secret. Rock Hudson was everything 1950s America wanted in a leading man: tall, handsome, masculine, and utterly unavailable to the women who adored him. His secret was Hollywood's worst kept, but most carefully guarded. He was gay in an industry that built fortunes on heterosexual fantasy. Studio executives at Universal Pictures crafted Hudson's image with military precision. Publicity dates with starlets. A brief arranged marriage to his agent's secretary. Carefully worded interviews about his search for the right girl. Every detail designed to conceal the truth from a public that wasn't ready for complexity in their heroes. Behind the facade, Hudson lived a double life that grew increasingly difficult to maintain. His real relationships happened in the shadows. Secret affairs with other actors, clandestine meetings in private clubs, a love life conducted entirely in darkness. The strain of constant deception affected every aspect of his life. Friends described him as increasingly isolated, dependent on alcohol to cope with the pressure of perpetual performance. Every public appearance was a carefully orchestrated lie. In 1985, Hudson became the first major celebrity to publicly acknowledge having AIDS. The announcement shattered his carefully constructed image and shocked a world that had believed in his heterosexual persona. Suddenly, America's ultimate masculine ideal became the face of a disease associated with gay men. His death marked the end of Hollywood's ability to completely control stars' public images. Hudson's courage in his final months did more to humanize gay men than decades of activism had accomplished. Spencer Tracy, the Catholic actor's internal conflict. Spencer Tracy won 2 consecutive Academy Awards and earned a reputation as one of Hollywood's finest actors. His natural, understated performances made him seem like the most honest man in a town built on illusion. But his personal life was far more complicated than his straightforward screen persona suggested. Tracy never divorced his wife, Louise, despite their separation in the 1930s. As a devout Catholic, he believed marriage was a sacred bond that couldn't be broken. But his faith also prevented him from acknowledging desires that his religion condemned. His long-term relationship with Katharine Hepburn became a Hollywood legend. The great love affair between 2 legendary actors. But insiders whispered about other relationships, particularly with younger male actors who found in Tracy a mentor and possibly something more. The rumors were persistent enough that Hepburn reportedly confronted Tracy about his sexuality multiple times. Their relationship, some suggested, was as much about mutual protection as romantic love. Two complex people providing each other with cover for their authentic selves. Tracy's struggles with alcoholism were legendary in Hollywood. Friends attributed his drinking to the conflict between his public image, his religious beliefs, and his private desires. He was a man trapped between multiple identities, unable to reconcile the different aspects of his personality. His daughter vehemently denied suggestions about his sexuality, but the questions persisted. Tracy took whatever truth he lived with to his grave, leaving only speculation about the internal conflicts that may have fueled both his greatest performances and his deepest pain. Spencer Tracy, the Catholic actor's internal conflict. Spencer Tracy won 2 consecutive Academy Awards and earned a reputation as one of Hollywood's finest actors. His natural, understated performances made him seem like the most honest man in a town built on illusion. But his personal life was far more complicated than his straightforward screen persona suggested. Tracy never divorced his wife Louise, despite their separation in the 1930s. As a devout Catholic, he believed marriage was a sacred bond that couldn't be broken. But his faith also prevented him from acknowledging desires that his religion condemned. His long-term relationship with Katharine Hepburn became a Hollywood legend, the great love affair between 2 legendary actors. But insiders whispered about other relationships, particularly with younger male actors who found in Tracy a mentor and possibly something more. The rumors were persistent enough that Hepburn reportedly confronted Tracy about his sexuality multiple times. Their relationship, some suggested, was as much about mutual protection as romantic love. 2 complex people providing each other with cover for their authentic selves. Tracy's struggles with alcoholism were legendary in Hollywood. Friends attributed his drinking to the conflict between his public image, his religious beliefs, and his private desires. He was a man trapped between multiple identities, unable to reconcile the different aspects of his personality. His daughter vehemently denied suggestions about his sexuality, but the questions persisted. Tracy took whatever truth he lived with to his grave, leaving only speculation about the internal conflicts that may have fueled both his greatest performances and his deepest pain. James Dean, the rebel's dangerous freedom. James Dean's brief career created a template for rebellious youth that endures today. His performances in East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant captured the restless energy of a generation questioning traditional values. But Dean's most dangerous rebellion was against Hollywood's sexual orthodoxy. When asked directly about his sexuality, Dean gave an answer that became legendary. "I'm not homosexual, but I won't live with one hand tied behind my back." The statement was both admission and defiance, a refusal to be limited by society's narrow categories. His roommate and close friend William Bast later revealed their intimate relationship, describing Dean as someone who loved without regard for gender. Director Nicholas Ray, who worked with Dean on Rebel Without a Cause, described him as openly bisexual on set. Dean's relationships with both men and women were conducted with unusual openness for the 1950s. He refused to participate in studio-arranged dates or manufactured romances. Instead, he lived according to his own code, pursuing connection wherever he found it. Elizabeth Taylor, who became one of his closest friends, revealed that Dean had confided in her about childhood sexual abuse by a priest. The trauma, she suggested, had profound effects on his adult relationships and his complex relationship with masculinity. Dean's death in a car crash at age 24 prevented him from facing the full consequences of his sexual honesty. But his brief life became a symbol for later generations of gay men who saw in his rebellion a template for their own struggles against societal expectations. Sal Mineo, the rebel's doomed beauty. At 17, Sal Mineo received an Oscar nomination for his heartbreaking performance as Plato in Rebel Without a Cause. His portrayal of a lonely teenager desperate for connection resonated with audiences worldwide. But his own search for connection would prove far more dangerous than any role. Mineo never officially came out, but he didn't exactly hide either. In an industry obsessed with rigid masculinity, his sensitivity marked him as different. As the 1960s progressed, the roles dried up. Hollywood had no place for actors who challenged traditional gender expectations. While James Dean became a martyred icon and Natalie Wood transitioned to adult stardom, Mineo found himself increasingly marginalized. The same vulnerability that made him a compelling actor became a liability in an industry that demanded conformity. By the 1970s, he was performing in small theaters, taking whatever work he could find. But he never stopped being true to himself. Friends described him as open about his sexuality in private, living authentically even as his career suffered. On February 12, 1976, Mineo was stabbed to death in a West Hollywood alley. The randomness of the crime shocked Hollywood, but the media's coverage revealed the industry's persistent homophobia. Headlines focused more on his lifestyle than on his artistic contributions. Decades later, his killer was revealed to be a stranger motivated by robbery, not homophobia. But by then, the damage was done. Another promising life cut short in a city that consumed its most sensitive souls. Marlon Brando, the method actor's sexual revolution. Marlon Brando didn't just revolutionize acting, he revolutionized American masculinity. His raw, animalistic performances challenged every convention about how men should behave on screen. Off-screen, he challenged sexual conventions with equal intensity. Brando's sexuality was as method as his acting. He approached relationships as experiences to be fully explored rather than identities to be maintained. His affairs with both men and women were legendary in Hollywood, conducted with a frankness that terrified studio executives. In 1976, he casually admitted to having homosexual experiences without shame or apology. The statement shocked America, but perfectly captured Brando's approach to life. He refused to be confined by anyone else's categories or expectations. His relationship with James Dean was particularly intense. Some described it as mentorship, others as a power struggle, but most agreed it was sexually charged. Both men were redefining masculinity, and their connection embodied the era's sexual revolution. Quincy Jones's revelation about Brando's affair with Richard Pryor added another layer to his sexual complexity. The relationship represented more than physical attraction. It was a connection between two artists who refused to be limited by society's expectations. Brando's multiple marriages and numerous children provided cover for his more controversial relationships, but he never completely hid his bisexuality. Friends described him as someone who loved intensely and without apology, regardless of gender. His sexual honesty was revolutionary in an industry built on carefully constructed fantasies, making him both an inspiration and a cautionary tale for actors who came after him. George Cukor, the director's open secret. George Cukor directed some of Hollywood's most sophisticated films, including The Philadelphia Story, My Fair Lady, and A Star is Born. His genius lay in creating complex female characters and drawing nuanced performances from his actors. But his greatest performance was pretending his sexuality was a secret. Within Hollywood's inner circles, Cukor's homosexuality was completely open. He hosted legendary parties at his Beverly Hills mansion, gatherings that became safe havens for gay actors, writers, and directors. The entire industry knew, but maintained a collective fiction of ignorance. His removal as director of Gone with the Wind allegedly stemmed from Clark Gable's discomfort with his sexuality. Whether Gable objected for personal or professional reasons remained Hollywood's eternal mystery. But the incident demonstrated the precarious position of gay directors in the studio system. Cukor responded to discrimination with quiet persistence. He continued making films, drawing brilliant performances from actors who trusted his sensitivity and understanding. His direction of actresses like Katharine Hepburn and Judy Garland was particularly inspired, perhaps because he understood what it meant to perform gender while hiding one's authentic self. His parties became legendary safe spaces where gay Hollywood could exist openly, if only for a few hours. Directors, actors, writers, and producers who spent their professional lives in carefully maintained closets could finally relax and be themselves. Cukor never publicly came out, but he never really hid either. His life was a masterclass in living authentically within an oppressive system, finding ways to be true to himself while navigating an industry that demanded conformity. Paul Lynde, the comedian's lonely performance. Paul Lynde's distinctive voice and sharp wit made him a television icon. His performances on Bewitched and the Hollywood Squares showcased his impeccable comedic timing and ability to deliver cutting one-liners with perfect precision. But his greatest joke was pretending to be straight. In an era when gay comedians were expected to make their sexuality the punchline, Lynde found a different approach. He was obviously gay to anyone paying attention, but never explicitly acknowledged it. His humor danced around the subject with innuendo and double entendres that satisfied both gay audiences who understood the codes and straight audiences who enjoyed the wordplay. This delicate balance took an enormous psychological toll. Lynde struggled with alcoholism and depression, using substances to cope with the loneliness of never being able to fully be himself publicly. Every performance required him to be simultaneously authentic and deceptive. His appearances on the Hollywood Squares were masterful examples of being gay without saying gay. His responses to questions were filled with subtle references that gay viewers appreciated while remaining safe enough for mainstream television. He was performing gay identity without claiming it. Behind the cameras, friends described a much sadder man. The constant performance exhausted him. He lived alone, struggled with relationships, and battled the demons that came from a lifetime of hiding his authentic self behind carefully crafted humor. Lynde's career represented both the possibilities and limitations of being gay in mainstream entertainment. He achieved success while remaining closeted, but paid a heavy personal price for that compromise. Cole Porter, the composer's coded love songs. Cole Porter composed some of American popular music's most sophisticated songs. His lyrics were witty, elegant, and seemingly heterosexual, perfect for Broadway shows and Hollywood films. But gay listeners heard different messages in songs like Love for Sale and Let's Do It. Porter's marriage to Lynde Lee Thomas provided perfect cover for his gay relationships. She was a wealthy, sophisticated woman who understood and accepted the arrangement. Their marriage was genuine friendship disguised as heterosexual romance, a business partnership that protected both their reputations. His songs were filled with coded references to gay life that only insiders would recognize. My Heart Belongs to Daddy included subtle double entendres. Anything Goes could be read as a celebration of sexual freedom. His lyrics operated on multiple levels, satisfying both mainstream audiences and gay listeners seeking representation. The code was necessary for survival in an entertainment industry that demanded heterosexual content. Porter found ways to express gay experiences through carefully chosen metaphors and wordplay. His songs became anthems for a community that had to hide in plain sight. His parties at his Waldorf Towers apartment became legendary gathering places for gay New York society. Writers, actors, musicians, and wealthy patrons mingled freely, creating a temporary space where authentic relationships could exist openly. Porter never publicly acknowledged his sexuality, but his music spoke to generations of gay listeners who found their experiences reflected in his sophisticated, coded lyrics. His legacy demonstrates the power of art to communicate truths that society wasn't ready to hear directly. Tab Hunter. The all-American boy's secret Tab Hunter embodied 1950s masculine ideals: blonde, athletic, wholesome, and seemingly available to every teenage girl in America. His recording of Young Love topped the charts, his films drew massive audiences, and his fan mail reached epic proportions. But Hollywood's perfect boy next door was living a carefully orchestrated lie. Hunter's relationship with Anthony Perkins was Hollywood's most romantic secret. Two of the era's biggest heartthrobs found love with each other while publicly dating starlets for magazine photographers. Their affair required elaborate choreography, separate entrances to parties, coded telephone conversations, stolen weekends away from Hollywood's watchful eyes. The studio system demanded complete control over Hunter's image, arranged dates with actresses, carefully planted gossip items, and publicity stunts designed to reinforce his heterosexual appeal. Every aspect of his public life was calculated to maintain the fantasy that made him valuable to his employers. Behind the facade, Hunter struggled with the constant deception. He desperately wanted to live authentically, but understood that honesty meant career suicide. The tension between his public image and private reality created enormous psychological pressure that affected every relationship in his life. His eventual autobiography, published decades later, revealed the full extent of his struggle. The man who seemed to have everything, fame, fortune, adoration, had been denied the most basic human right: the ability to love openly. Hunter's story represents the tragedy of an entire generation of gay actors who achieved success only by denying their authentic selves. These 15 stories represent just the visible tip of Hollywood's hidden iceberg. For every star whose secret we know, dozens more lived and died with their truths buried beneath the machinery of the studio system. The Golden Age's glittering facade was built on the sacrifice of authentic lives, dreams deferred, and loves denied. What strikes deepest about these stories isn't the tragedy, it's the resilience. Men like William Haynes, who chose love over career success. Directors like George Cukor, who created safe spaces for others. Performers like Montgomery Clift, who refused to completely compromise their authenticity even when it cost them everything. Their courage laid the groundwork for today's more open entertainment industry. Every contemporary actor who can live openly, every same-sex couple who can walk red carpets together, every LGBTQ+ story told honestly on screen, all of this exists because these pioneers endured the darkness so that others might eventually walk in the light. The real scandal isn't that these men were gay. The real scandal is that they were forced to pretend otherwise, that an entire industry built its fortunes on denying the humanity of its most talented artists. Their stories remind us that authenticity is always worth fighting for, even when the cost seems unbearable. Subscribe for more hidden histories, and remember, the truth always finds its way to the surface, even if it takes decades to emerge.